My sister said, I'm just following Dad's wishes, as she took control of the trust and the property after the funeral. I didn't challenge her. Not that day, not with dirt still fresh on the casket and relatives milling around the kitchen eating casseroles they hadn't earned the right to taste. I let her have the room. I let her have the sympathy. I let her have the moment. But when a timeline was mentioned during the review and someone checked the dates, her smile finally cracked. And mine didn't. Because I'd been waiting. And now I'm telling you the full truth, not because I want to destroy her, but because I don't owe anyone the lie anymore. Not the relatives, not the lawyers, not the version of myself who stayed silent to keep peace in a house that was never peaceful to begin with. My name is Claire Monroe. I'm 31 years old. I live in Franklin, Tennessee, in a house I used to share with my father while he was dying, and my sister was 3 states away, pretending distance was the same as grief. If you've ever held someone's hand through their worst days and then watched someone else accept the thank you cards, you already know part of this story. If you're watching from a place that ever made you feel invisible in your own family, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. I'd like to know I'm not speaking into the silence alone. Let me take you back. Not far, just far enough to understand why I stayed quiet for so long and what finally broke that silence into something sharper than words. My father was Gerald Monroe, 67 years old when he was diagnosed with early onset vascular dementia, a proud man. Stubborn, in the way Southern men often are, the kind who confused vulnerability with weakness and silence with strength. He owned a small commercial real estate company, nothing empire-sized, but enough to matter, enough to fight over. When the diagnosis came, Dana was living in Boston. She had a consulting career and a condo with a view of the harbor and a life that didn't include monthly doctor's appointments or midnight phone calls about confusion and wandering. I was already here. I'd moved back after college to help him with the business. I stayed because someone had to, and I stayed longer because no one else showed up. For 3 years, I was the one managing his medication schedule. I was the one learning the difference between a good day and a dangerous one. I was the one calling his doctor at 2 in the morning when he didn't recognize the hallway. I was the one bathing him when he forgot how. I was the one bathing him when he forgot how. I was the one bathing him when he forgot how. And Dana visited twice a year, smiled through dinners, and always left with promises she never kept. I'll be back next month. I'll take over the finances soon so you can breathe. We should talk about the future, together. Together. Always soon, always later. But later never came, until Dad was too far gone to fight it. You want to know what happened? Fine, let me walk you through it. 3 months before my father died, he signed a new power of attorney, a durable one. It gave Dana complete authority over all legal, financial, and medical decisions, effective immediately. It also revised the terms of the family trust, rebalancing the shares so that she would receive 70% of all estate assets upon his death, with the remaining 30% allocated to me. The reasoning, as Dana later explained to the lawyer, to the family, to anyone who would listen, was that our father believed she had the business sense to manage the legacy properly. And I, Claire, the one who had been balancing his checkbook for years, and filing his taxes and holding the pen when his hand shook too hard to sign checks, apparently had nothing of value to offer. Here's the thing. I might have believed it, not because it was true, but because I had spent so long being unseen that erasure started to feel like something I deserved. When no one tells you that you matter, you start to believe them. You start to think maybe your silence is a gift you're giving. Maybe you're noble for not asking. Maybe sacrifice means disappearing. I almost believed all of it. But then Emma Aldridge, the estate attorney, opened a file folder at the conference table 3 days after the funeral. She was going through the trust revision documents, standard procedure, and she paused on a notarized page. This was signed on February 14th, she said. Not suspicious, just reading. I looked up. February 14th. I remembered that day. I remembered it clearly, because on February 14th, my father was in the ICU at Williamson Medical Center. He had been unresponsive for 2 days following a fall that caused a brain bleed. I had slept in the chair beside his bed. I had signed consent forms for his care. I had watched his monitors rise and fall like the slowest tide I had ever seen. He did not sign anything that day. He could not have. He was unconscious. I looked at Dana across the table. She was already smiling. that soft, sad smile she uses when she wants people to feel sorry for her. She tilted her head and placed a hand flat on the table, near the paper. Dad wanted to make sure everything was in order, she said. We handled it before he got really bad. He was worried about burdening you. Emma nodded. She didn't know, but I did. And I said nothing. Not yet. There's a moment, I think, in every quiet person's life where they come right up to the edge of speech and then swallow it. You know the moment I mean. The truth is sitting on your tongue like a bitter seed, and you could spit it out right there in front of everyone, but something stops you. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's exhaustion. Maybe you've been trained so long to keep the peace that war feels impossible even when you're already bleeding. I had my bag in my car. Not a suitcase, but close enough. I had planned to leave Franklin after the reading. I had no reason to stay. No inheritance waiting. No acknowledgement. Just a house full of memories I had made alone, while Dana collected credit for showing up at the end. I almost drove away. I remember sitting in the driver's seat in the parking lot of the law office with my hands on the wheel and my eyes fixed on the road ahead. The engine was running. The heat was on. It would have been easy. Just go. Let Dana have her lie. Let her live with it. Walk away and build something new somewhere that didn't smell like antiseptic and grief. But my phone buzzed in my pocket. A voicemail I had forgotten about. One of my own recordings. I used to send myself voice memos during the worst of Dad's decline. Medical updates. Pharmacy reminders. Sometimes just notes about what he said on good days so I could remember him clearly when the bad ones came. I hadn't listened to them in months. But that night, parked in that lot with the engine humming, I pressed play on one I didn't recognize. My voice came through first. Tired. Hoarse. February 12th. Dad had a fall this morning. They're taking him in for imaging. He's disoriented. Doesn't remember what day it is. Keeps asking for Mom. Doctor says we need to prepare for the possibility he doesn't come back to baseline. And then, behind my voice, I heard something else. His voice. Faint. Confused. Claire? Did I sign something? Dana keeps asking me to sign things. I don't remember what I signed. And my reply. Gentle. Reassuring. You didn't sign anything today, Dad. You're in the hospital. It's okay. I sat in that car for a long time. I didn't cry. I don't cry anymore. That reflex dried out somewhere around year 2. But something changed. Something calcified into certainty. She hadn't just lied. She had forged documents while our father lay dying, using a date when he was unconscious, and I was the only witness to his condition, because she assumed I would never check. She assumed I would never fight. She assumed I would do what I had always done, disappear. And I almost did. But I didn't. I turned the engine off. I pulled my bag from the back seat. I walked back into town, and I checked into a motel for the night, because I needed to think clearly. And the next morning, I called a different attorney. One Dana had never met. His name was Victor Sims. Estate litigation. 20 years of experience. A voice like gravel and a patience that matched my own. I told him everything. I sent him the audio file, and I began to build my case in silence. The same way I had lived my whole life, except this time the silence was a weapon instead of a wound. If you've ever had to prove something that everyone else wanted to ignore, you know how heavy that kind of quiet gets. If that's you, tap the like button. It helps this story reach someone else who might need to hear it. Now let me tell you about the part where I almost felt sorry for her. It was 3 weeks into the investigation. I was gathering documents, medical records, timestamps. I had already confirmed that my father's hospital admission notes showed him sedated and unresponsive on the day the power of attorney was notarized. I had evidence. I had a trail. And then Dana called me, not to yell, not to threaten. She didn't know what I had found yet. She called to cry. She said she missed him. She said she didn't know how to run the company. She said the weight of everything was too much, and she wished I was there to help her carry it. She said, "You were always stronger than me, Claire. I just didn't know how to say it." And I believed her. For about 30 seconds, I believed that maybe she wasn't calculating. Maybe she was just lost. Maybe she panicked and made a terrible decision, and now she was drowning in the consequences. Maybe I was the villain for not giving her the chance to confess. But then I found the bank records. 9 months before my father's hospitalization, Dana had already begun transferring assets out of his name. Small amounts at first. Retirement funds shifted into joint accounts with only her name attached. A rental property sold and reinvested into her personal brokerage portfolio. A life insurance policy updated to list her as the sole beneficiary. She hadn't panicked. She had planned. She had been draining our father's estate for nearly a year before he signed anything, and she had used his declining memory as cover. Every visit she made, every dinner she smiled through, every time she told me she just wanted to help, she was already pulling threads out of the fabric of his legacy and stitching them into her own. This wasn't grief. This wasn't confusion. This was architecture. And that was when I stopped feeling sorry for her. Victor filed a formal petition to contest the trust and invalidate the power of attorney. The claim was straightforward: incapacity, fraud, forgery. The notarization date conflicted with documented medical evidence. The signature itself, once examined, showed inconsistencies with samples from earlier years. The notary, a man named Dale Hutchins, had no independent memory of the signing and admitted under deposition that Dana had handled the arrangements privately. Dana responded with silence, then denial, then lawyers. But her lawyers couldn't change the timeline. They couldn't unwrite the hospital records or erase the audio file or explain away 9 months of unauthorized transfers. They tried. They pushed back hard. But there's only so much polish you can put on a lie before it starts to stink. The court date was set for late September. But before that, Dana asked to see me. One final time. She said she wanted to talk. Sister to sister. I agreed. Not because I owed her anything, but because I needed to hear it. I needed to know if there was any part of her that understood what she had done. We met at a coffee shop just off Main Street, neutral ground. She was already seated when I arrived, her hands wrapped around a cup she hadn't sipped from. Her eyes were red, her voice was soft. She said, "You're going to destroy me, aren't you?" I didn't answer, she said. I was just trying to protect the estate. You were so close to everything, you couldn't see the full picture. I still didn't answer. She looked down, she swallowed. And then she said the words I had been waiting years to hear without knowing it. You were always better in the background, Claire. You didn't want the spotlight anyway. I let the words sit between us. Let them breathe. Let them rot in the open air. And then I said quietly, the only thing I had planned to say, "This isn't revenge, this is restoration." I stood up. I left money on the table for her untouched coffee, and I walked out without looking back. The court ruled in my favor 6 weeks later. The power of attorney was declared void due to documented incapacity at the time of signing. The trust revisions made under that authority were reversed. The estate was rebalanced according to the original terms, which split all assets equally between both daughters. Dana was removed as trustee. A neutral third party was appointed in her place. But that wasn't all. The property, the house where I had cared for our father, where I had slept on the floor beside his hospital bed in the living room, where I had spoon-fed him soup and wiped his chin and whispered old memories into his ear until his breathing slowed into silence, was ruled part of the contested assets. Dana had moved to claim it under the revised trust. She had already started talking about selling it. The judge awarded it to me. Solely, fully, legally, not because of sentimentality, but because the paperwork she had filed to claim it was based on documents now deemed fraudulent, and possession reverted to the party who had maintained the property during the decedent's final years. That was me. I signed the title transfer on a Tuesday morning in early October. The pen felt heavier than anything I had held in years. My name went on the line where hers had been. Claire Monroe, sole owner. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I just sat in my car afterward and listened to the quiet. Real quiet, not the kind I had trained myself to endure, but the kind that comes after something has finally ended. Dana tried to appeal. It failed. She tried to negotiate. I declined. She sent me a letter 2 months later that I didn't open. I don't know what it says. I don't need to. What I know is this. For 3 years I gave everything I had to a man who never told me he was proud of me. I wiped his brow and held his hand and watched him disappear, one memory at a time. I did it because he was my father, and because no one else would, and because I believed, foolishly, that love was supposed to cost that much. And when he died, my sister stood in front of a room full of people and accepted their sympathy like she had earned it. She told them she was following his wishes. She was following her own. I don't hate her. That might surprise you. but hate takes energy I don't have anymore. What I feel is something quieter, something colder. It's the recognition that some people will never see you, no matter how much you give, and at some point, you have to stop auditioning for roles in a family that never wanted to cast you. I got the house. I got half the estate. I got my name on a document that says I existed, that I mattered, that my years were not invisible. But more than that, I got something no court could grant me. I got to stop pretending. Dana still lives in Boston. I hear she's consulting again. Rebuilding, probably. She's good at that. Good at starting over in places where no one knows what she did. I'm still in Franklin. Still in the house. I changed the locks 3 weeks ago. Not because I thought she'd come back, but because I wanted the last thing she touched to be gone. Sometimes I sit on the porch, where I used to sit with Dad on his good nights, and I listen to the Tennessee evening roll in slow and warm. I think about the version of me who almost drove away, who almost let the lie stand because fighting felt too hard. She's still in there, that version, quiet, careful, tired, but she's not running anymore, and she's not invisible. There's a quote I read somewhere once. I can't remember who said it, but it goes something like this. The truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it just sets you apart. I think about that a lot because telling the truth didn't make me popular. It didn't fix my family. It didn't bring back the years I lost, or the father who never learned to say he loved me. But it gave me ground to stand on. And for the first time in a long time, I'm not standing on someone else's version of my life. If you're still watching, thank you. Really, I didn't know how this would feel to say out loud, but now that it's done, I think I understand why people do it. Not for validation, not for pity, just to be heard, just to have the record finally match the truth. If this story meant something to you, subscribe, leave a like, and let me know in the comments which part stayed with you. I read every single one.